Ham Sharadava Nalalidaloka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Samsaradava Nalalidaloka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Praptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Praptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nritya Gita Vaditramadya Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu Romanchakam Pasru Tarangavaju Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Shri Vigrara Dana Nityanana Shringaratanama Diramajanadu Juktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatapi Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satmana Truptan Hari Bhakta Sangam Bhagavat Prasada Kridvaiva Trupti Bhajato Shariva Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Shradikama Dabayara Para Madhura Lila Gunarupanamna Shradikama Dabayara Para Madhura Lila Pratikshana Danalalupasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Ne kunjayono Ratikeli Siddhai Chayali Virjukti Apekshaneya Jono Ratikeli Siddhai Chayali Virjukti Tatrati Daksha Ativalabhasya Vande Gurashi Charanaravrindam Ativalabhasya Sakcha Dharitena Samasta Shastri Ruktastat Tathava Vataiva Sadhavi Kintu Praborja Priya Eva Tasya Vande Gurashi Charanarabindam Priya Eva Tasya Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasadam Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Dayam Stuvam Tasya Yasatrisanyam Vande Gurashi Charanarabindam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Samin Itina Mine Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Samin Itina Namaste Sarasate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachatari Shatarine Namaste Shunavadi Pachatadi Shata Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hariyaraye Namah Krishna Jadavaye Namah Hariyaraye Jadavaye Madhavaya Kesavaye Namaha Gopal Govindaram Shrimadhusudan Giridhari Gopina Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Shri Radha Nila Madhava Radha Nila Madhava Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadrama Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Nitai Gaur Haribo 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo 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 Nitai Gaur Pramanande Haribo Jaya Vishwapara Paramsa Prabhajaka Ashtuttara Sarasi Shimar Divine Grace Abhacharmina Bhakti Viranta Samara Shira Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Pratishta Bhakti Samstapakachar Vaishnav Ceremony Parita Pavana Shira Prabhupada Ji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Gaurya Guru Varga Patitu Udhar Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatana Patra Gunata Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Guna Sat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai Jayananta Kuj Vaishnav Vrindi Ki Jai प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासारि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तन के जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद स्मरण गौरंग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि मावरण अवतार की जय गौलोकेर प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन जग की जय जुग धर्म हरे श्री राधा कृष्णा गोप राधा कुंड समकुंड गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय श्री ब्रजभूमि वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की जय तिलोशिव श्री राधा माधव की जय श्री श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्र धाम की जय जय परम करुण श्री गौर निताय की जय श्री पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु सुभद्रा देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशना कनिष्ठिंगरे भगवान की जय जगंगा माय जमुना माय की जय तुलसी महारानी वृंदी देवी भक्ति देवी की जय श्रीमती राधारानी की जय समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय निताय गौरी प्रमानंद हरिभो all glories to the Son of the bodies all glories to the Son of the bodies all glories to the Son of the bodies all glories to Shri Guru Shri Gauranga. Namaste Narasingaya Namaste Narasingaya Pralada da da aine Hiranyakasipu Bhaksha Silatankanakalaye Ito nishinga Parato nishinga Jato jato jami tato nishinga Bair nishinga Hrudaye nishinga Narasingha Madim Sharanam Prapade Tava kara kamala bare Naka Arabuta Singha Darita Hiranyakashipu Tanabringa Kesavadrita Naradirupa Jai Jagadisare Jai Jagadish Hare, Jai Jagadish Hare, Tabakara Narahari Rupa, Jai Jagadish Hare. Kesavadruta Narahari Rupa, Jai Jagadish Hare, Jai Jagadish Hare, Jai Jagadish Hare. Narahari Rupa, Jai Jagadish Hare, Jai Jagadish Hare, Jai Jagadish Hare. Jaya Nishingare, Jaya Nishingare, Nishingare, Jaya Nishingare. Jaya Narahari, Jaya Narahari, Narahari, Jaya Narahari. Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha. Jaya Prahlad Mara, Prahlad Mara, Bhakta Prahlad, Jaya Prahlad Mara. Nittai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nittai Gaura Haribo. Jai Shri Shri Bhakti Pata Sarabhignashna Kari Shingare Bhagavan ki jai. De Bhakta Shrestha Prahlad Maharaj ki jai. Nittai Gaurari Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Vai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradirivi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Vai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradirivi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Pradidevi Satavatai Namo Namaha. Jashmati Tulasi Maharani Vrindadevi ki jai. Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Namaha Radha Krishna Seva Pava Eya Vilasi Radha Krishna Radha Krishna Seva Pava Eya Vilasi Jetomara Sharanala Taravancha Puna Jetomara Kripa Kari Karatare Vrindavanavasi Mora Eya Vila Vilasa Kunje Diyava Mora Eya Vi Nayane Ribo Sada Jogala Ruparasi Aminayane Sada Jogala Ene Vedana Dhara Sakhirayano Gatakara Ene Vedana Dhara Sevayadi Kara Diye Kara Nijadasi Dina Krishna Dasiko Eyenamora Sri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayenavasi Sri Radha Govinda Preme Sadayenavasi Jani Kanisa Papani Brahma Tari Kanisa Tani Tani Prana Santi Pradakshina Pade Pade Jani Kanisa Papani Brahma Tari Kanisa Tani Tani Prana Santi Pradakshina Pade Pade Yani Kanisa Papani Brahmatari Kanisa Tani Tani Prana Santi Pradakshina Pade Pade Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Brinda Devi Jaya Tulsi Maharani Jaya Brinda Devi. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo. Bolo Tulsi Maharani Brinda Devi ki jai. Shri Vrindai Tulsi Devi Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulsi Devi Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyayai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Jashmati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence in pleasure groves of Shri Vrindavan. Thus within my vision, I will always behold beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavadhyams of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant of Krishna praise. May I always sing in love Shri Radha and Govind. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shiksha-stakam ki jai. Chaito Majanam Bhavamadavanivapana Shreyakari Vachandikari Taranam Vidyavadu Jivanam Anandam Vivardhanam Viparam Purnam Natasradhanam Sarvatmasnam Param Param Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Baudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrapi Tanyam Tashmane Nakala Itadrushi Tava Kripaya Bhavavarmamapi Durdaiva Midrishamyajani Nanuragaha Trinadapi Shanichena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amani Namanadena Kirtaniya Sada Hari Na Dhanam Na Janam Na Sundarim Kavitam Vajagadishaka Maye Mama Janmani Janmanishwari Bhavatar Bhakti Rahaitu Tvai Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Paritamam Vishame Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tapapada Pankaja Sitaduli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam Galorashrudharaya Vadanam Gadagadharudaya Gira Polakai Nichitam Papukada Tavanama Grahane Bhavisati Jugai Itam Nimishena Chakrusha Prabhusa Itam Shunya Itam Jagata Sarvam Govinda Virahename Aslisha Vapadaratam Pinashtumam Adarshnar Marmahatam Karotuva Jatata Thava Viradatu Lampato Matprana Tastu Saivana Para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shikhastakam Ki Jai Om Mahavranaya Krishna Prem Pradaya Krishna Krishna Chaitanya. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of condition of life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are no hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in an humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than straw in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotion service, birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, some or other, I have fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on the end of the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he sure remains so. Even if handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me, he is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shikhastakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting of holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme, the devotee whose dedicated life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the names of demigods, our Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name of Lord Vishnu. 3. to disobey the orders the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature and pursuance of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation on the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in Vedas as fruitive activity, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the faithless person about the glories of holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting of the holy names and to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prem. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditions of souls.
Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavane Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Vaishnava Thakur Ki Jai Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskati Satarni. Shri Guru Pranama Prayers Ki Jai. Om Aganyati Mirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Vishnam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Jadaha Pachakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Saidvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Visakha Nivitam Sa Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Namaha Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namini Shivasavanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujjvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Abhasiddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Gora Kishoraya Shakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Rasambode Padambujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachitananda Namine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gora Vir Bhava Bhumestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Sri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Premapadaya Te Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Chase Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Nahe Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Suratur Pangur Mamamanda Matergati Matsarva Swapadambojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumadaha Shimad Ratnagara Simhasanastato Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prestali Bihi Sevyamanam Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasa Rambi Vamsivata Tatastita Karsan Venus Swaner Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai. Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadi Radhi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam Chintamani Prakara Sadmasukalpa Vriksha Laksha Vrite Susurabi Rabibali Antam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamanam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kvanantam Aravinda Dalayataksham Barhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasadvanamaya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribanga Lalita Niyata Prakasam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chirajaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purisham Navayovanam Cha Vedesa Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manaso Munipungamanam Sopyasti Yadpapadasimya Vichintya Tatve Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sorochayitum Jagadanda Koti Kunchasti Rasti Dagaranda Jaya Yadanta Andantarasta Paramanu Jayantarastam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Dio Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktarya Meva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmayara Sarpati Bhavitavis Tabirya Eva Nija Rupa Tayakalabi Goloka eva nivasata kilatma bhuto Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Charitavati Lochanena Santaksadeva Hidayesu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarubam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Amena Tistan Nanavataram Akarod Bhuvane Sukintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pamamyo Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadanda Koti Koti Svasesu Vasadadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahma Nisgalam Anantam Ashesha Bhutam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Hiyasya Jagadanda Satani Sute Trigunya Tad Visaya Veda Vitaya Manam Sattva Valambi Parasatvam Visuddha Sattvam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasatmataya Manasu Ya Praninam Pratifalam Smaratam Upetya Leelaya Tena Bhuvanani Jayaya Jasram Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Golokanamni Nijadamni Tale Chatasya Devi Mahesu Haridama Sute Sutesu Te Te Prabhava Nichaya Vihitascha Yena Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shristishtate Pralaya Sadava Sakti Reka Jayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vivarti Durga Ichanurupam Apiyasya Chachestate Sa Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Dadi Vikara Visesa Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Hetu Yasam Bhutama Pitata Samabhaiti Karyat Govindam Adi Purisham tamaham bhajami Deeparchadeva hita santaram abhyabhetya Deepayate vivita hita samana dharma Yastadhageva hicha vishnutaya vibhati Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami Yakarna narndava jale bhajati sma yoga Nidram ananta jagadanda saroma kupa Adhada saktim avalambya param swamurtim Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami Yasyaika nisvasita kalamatavalamya Jivanti loma vilaja jagadandanata Vishnur mahansahi yasya kalaviseso Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami Baswanya tasma sakalesu nijesu teja Swiyam kiyat prakatayat apitadvadatra Brahmaya esa jagadanda vidanukarta Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami Yadpada balava yugam vinidaya kumbha dvande spanama samaye Saganadi raja vignan vihantam alamasya jagatrayasya Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami Agnir mahiga ganamambu marudisascha Kalas tatatma manasiti jagatrayani Yasmad bhavanti vipavanti visanti yancha Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami Yaschaksuresa savitasa kalagrahana Raja samasta suramurti rasesa teja Yasya gaya brahmati sambrita kala chakro Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami Dharmo tapapa nichaya srutayasta pamsi Brahma dikita patagava dayasta jiva Yadata matra vibhava prakata prabhava Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami Yastrindra lokam aptavendra ahosva karma bandhan rupa falabhajana matanoti karmani nitaharti kantucha bhakti bhajam Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami Yam krodha kama sahaja pranayadi bitti vatsalya moha guru gaurava sevya bhavai sanchintya tasya sadrasim tanamapurete Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami shayakanta kanta paramapurusha kalpataravo trumabhumischintamani ganam ayitoyam amritam kataganam natyam gamanam apivam sipriyasaki chidanandam jyoti param apitad aswadya apicha sayatra shiradibhi sravati shirabhyabhyascha suman nimesar dakyuva vajati nahi atrapi samaya bhaje svita dvitam tamaham iha golakam itiyam vidantaste santakshiti viralachara kati Ishvara Paramakrishna Sachitananda Vigraha and Adiradi Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 2 Chapter 10 Verse number 9 Ekam Ekatara Bhave Yada no palama mahe Chitayam tatrako yo veda Saatma swashrayashraya Ekam, one. Ekatara, another. Abhave, in the absence of. Yada, because. Na, does not. Upabhamahe, perceptible. Tritayam, in 3 stages. Tatra, there. Ya, the one. Veda, who knows. Sa, he. Atma, the supersoul. Swa, own. Ashraya, shelter. Ashraya, of the shelter. All 3 of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being, who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter, is independent of all, and therefore he is the supreme shelter. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. There are innumerable living entities, one dependent on the other, in the relationship of the controlled and the controller. But without the medium of perception, No one can know or understand who is the controlled and who is the controller. For example, the sun controls the power of our vision. We can see the sun because the sun has its body, and the sunlight is useful only because we have eyes. Without our having eyes, the sunlight is useless, and without sunlight, the eyes are useless. Thus, they are interdependent, and none of them is independent. Therefore, the natural question arises concerning who made them interdependent. The one who has made such a relationship of interdependence must be ultimately completely independent. As stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the ultimate source of all interdependent objectives is the complete independent subject. This ultimate source of all interdependence is the Supreme Truth, or Paramatma, the Supersoul, who is not dependent on anything else. He is swasrayasrayaha. He is only dependent on his self, and thus he is the supreme shelter of everything. Although Paramatma and Brahman are subordinate to Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is Purushottama, or the supreme, or the super person, he is the source of the super soul also. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:18, Lord Krishna says that he is the Purushottama and the source of everything. And thus it is concluded that Sri Krishna is the ultimate source and shelter of all entities, including the Supersoul and the Supreme Brahman. Even accepting that there is no difference between the Supersoul and the individual soul is dependent on the Supersoul for being liberated from the illusion of material energy. The individual is under the clutches of illusory energy, and therefore, although qualitatively one with the Supersoul, he is under the illusion of identifying himself with matter. And to get out of this illusory conception of factual life, the individual soul has to depend on the Supersoul to be recognized as one with him. In that sense, also, the Supersoul is the supreme shelter, and there is no doubt about it. The individual living entity, the jiva, is always dependent on the Supersoul, Paramatma, because the individual soul forgets his spiritual identity, whereas the Supersoul, Paramatma, does not forget. His transcendental position. In the Bhagavad Gita, these separate positions of the Jivatma and the Paramatma are specifically mentioned. In the 4th chapter, Arjuna, the Jiva soul, is represented as forgetful of his many, many previous births. But the Lord, the Supersoul, is not forgetful. The Lord even remembers when he taught the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god some billions of years before. The Lord can remember such millions and billions of years, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 7:26, as follows: Vedaham samatitani vartavanani charjana bhavishyami chadbhutani mam tu vedana kaschana. And that's a very important verse. It says basically that Krishna knows everything, but others hardly know him. So let's read the exact translation. It says, O Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living beings, but me, nobody knows. The Lord, in his eternal blissful body of knowledge, is fully aware of all that happened in the past, that which is going on at the present, and also what will happen in the future. But in spite of his being the shelter of both the Paramatma and the Brahman, persons with a poor fund of knowledge are unable to understand him as he is. The propaganda of the identity of cosmic consciousness with the consciousness of the individual living entities is completely misleading, because even such a person or individual as Arjuna could not remember his past deeds, although he is always with the Lord. And what can the tiny, ordinary man, falsely claiming to be one with the cosmic consciousness, know about his past, present, and future? Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All three of the above-mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being, who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter, is independent of all, and therefore he is the supreme shelter. So what's extremely interesting here, just as an addition that Prabhupada makes, is that last paragraph in which he says the propaganda of the identity of cosmic consciousness with the consciousness of the individual living entities is completely misleading, because even such a person or individual soul as Arjuna could not remember his past deeds, although he is always with the Lord. What is Prabhupada alluding to here? Aurobindo. Aurobindo made this one of his main, let's say, contributions to Vedanta. That is, he talked about cosmic consciousness, that the jiva can attain this cosmic consciousness. He was talking about this in his books and his speeches. And here Prabhupada really debunks him very firmly, and he says that this propaganda of the identity or cosmic consciousness with the consciousness of the individual living entities is completely misleading. So there's only one independent supreme personality of Godhead, that's Krishna. And Arjuna, although he's always in relationship to Krishna in his pastimes in the material world, he was not able to remember being with Krishna previously, right? Because he's a jiva, he's not God himself. So this is explained in the 4th chapter, where it says, so Arjuna says, aparam bhavato janma, param janma vivasvataha, katam etad vijaniyam, tvam ado proktavam iti. So he says, Arjuna said, the sun god Vivaswan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? So, in the purport, Prabhupada says, Arjuna is an accepted devotee of the Lord, so how could he not believe Krishna's words? The fact is that Arjuna is not inquiring for himself, but for those who do not believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or for the demons who do not like the idea that Krishna should be accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For them, only Arjuna inquires on this point, as if he were himself not aware of the personality of Godhead or Krishna. As it will be evident from the 10th chapter, Arjuna knew perfectly well that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the fountainhead of everything, and the last word in transcendence. Now, would you understand that if you just had the verse and with no purport? There are Bhagavad Gitas like that. People have just present the verse with no purport. Now, how would you understand this? You think, well, Arjuna didn't really know. Didn't really have full faith in Krishna. No, he does. But he's asking this question for all the other dummies that don't have faith in Krishna. Of course, Krishna also appeared as the son of Devaki on this earth. How Krishna remained the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, the eternal original person, is very difficult for an ordinary man to understand. So an ordinary man would say, well, it says that Krishna was born as the son of Devaki and Vasudeva. So how can he be the Supreme Personality of Godhead who spoke to Vivaswan billions of years ago? Well, that's using logic, isn't it? If he was only born 5,000 years ago, how could he speak billions of years ago to Vivaswan? But see, that's the problem. Without the purports of the acharyas, we'll have millions of misconceptions just by reading the verses. Therefore, Prabhupada wrote the very detailed commentaries or purports so that we do not slip and slide down the slippery slope of misconception. So he says, therefore, to clarify this point, Arjuna put this question before Krishna so that he himself could speak authoritatively. That Krishna is the supreme authority is accepted by the whole world, not only at present, but from time immemorial, and the demons alone reject him. Anyway, since Krishna is the authority accepted by all, Arjuna put this question before him in order that Krishna would describe himself without being depicted by the demons, who always try to distort Krishna in a way understandable to the demons and their followers. So this is a technique of what you call identifying a person or creating an image of a person, just like the Democrats create the image of Trump as a really bad, nasty guy, right? And the Republicans paint an image of Biden as a senile, old fuddy-duddy, right? Doesn't know what he's doing, is confused, doesn't know where he is, he says crazy things every once in a while, acts confused, and so forth. So we see this characterizing a person is a technique of what you would call slander. Slander is a pretty hard word, but when you characterize a person, just like ISKCON was characterized by the news media and people who were against ISKCON, and it was publicized in the news. That ISKCON brainwashes kids. They did the same thing with other spiritual groups, and therefore we have to characterize ourselves, and we did when I insisted that we call the ISKCON temple in Sammamish the Vedic Cultural Center. It's a center of culture, Vedic culture. So most people know us like that. If you say this ISKCON, some people go, oh, ISKCON? Oh, no, this is very bad. That's from India, right? Because ISKCON has been characterized by the Indian, by Bollywood movies and other and Indian newspapers and things like that. Not always bad, but at one point it was all bad. ISKCON was characterized as members of the CIA, and they talked about it in the Parliament of India, right? So we have to characterize ourselves or identify ourselves. So therefore, when we have a food truck and it goes out and feeds people, we're identifying ourselves. And when we have Ananda Mela and these festivals, we're identifying ourselves. We're not being characterized by the outside people, right? So we have to do things that transmit the correct characterization of who we are. Otherwise, the others are going to characterize us. The others are going to define who we are. And that's often going to be very negative, right? Just like one lady who lives in Borneo, which is an island in the South Pacific. She's an Indian lady. Her husband moved there and has a business there. They moved from North India. Anyway, she came here one day, not so long ago, and she took the bus. Came from Seattle to the bus station in Redmond, and then from Redmond, she got another bus that came here. So, when she was in the bus, from Redmond to here, she asked some people in the bus if they knew which stop was for the Krishna temple, right? And the people knew. And they said, "You're going there?" And she said, "Yes." "Oh, they have very good food there." Do you remember that? Were you here when that? No. You were there, huh? What did she say? You tell us.
She was like, she came from Borneo. Her daughter and son, they are like
In Amazon. They both work in Amazon.
Amazon,
Oh, no. The son works in Amazon. The daughter works somewhere in...
Daughter studies in Stanford. I think.
Yes. Yeah.
And then she didn't know also that there is a temple here, but when she started asking, and then a lot of people actually said, yeah, there is a Vedic cultural center, and then she talked about this. When in the bus and all, she was, which stop? Yeah, the same thing as you mentioned.
See, isn't that amazing? That
Yeah, she is.
now these are just random people, right? But they say, "Oh, they have very good food there, and it's free." You see that we have defined ourselves. The papers won't do that because most of the journalists are demons, right? But we define ourselves, then they're forced to identify us like that. But you have to have a lot of give the people experience of who we are, right? If all they know is, we're the people that pester people in airports and on the streets to buy books. So that's a very negative idea of who we are. So we did have a food fair in 2019 with up to 4,000 people came, and the mayor came also of Sammamish, and that defined who we are. That we have good food, and we gave it all out free. We fed everyone. I don't know if you remember that. It was like very chaotic because so many people came.
It was overcrowded here.
Oh, very overcrowded. It was outside. But it was a great festival. It was a great time.
It was a very unique experience for us as well, handling this many people
in the temple. Yeah. So you see, we defined you define yourself by doing things like that. You don't let them define us, them meaning the outside people. We define ourselves by doing these type of outreach programs, right? Okay, so Arjuna here is asking this question so Krishna can define himself and not be slandered or pejoratively presented by the outside people. Pejorative is a very good word. P-E-J-O-R-A-T-I-V-E. Look that up. Okay, so it says, anyway, since Krishna is the authority accepted by all, Arjuna put this question before him in order that Krishna would describe himself without being depicted by the demons, who always try to distort him in a way understandable to the demons and their followers. You got that word?
Yes.
What's it mean?
It says expressing contempt or disapproval.
Yeah, see, that's a good word to know. Expressing contempt or disapproval. Right? It is necessary that everyone, for his own interests, know the science of Krishna. Therefore, when Krishna himself speaks about himself, it is auspicious for all the worlds. So again, science of Krishna. How many times does he say this in the Bhagavad Gita? We should count it. I'm sure it'll run into maybe 100 times or 80 times or something like that. Because this is science. This is eternal truth that's valid in all reference frames and all times. So therefore, it is real science. Therefore, when Krishna himself speaks about himself, it is auspicious for all the worlds. To the demons, such explanations by Krishna himself may appear to be strange, because the demons always study Krishna from their own standpoint. But those who are devotees heartily welcome the statements of Krishna when they are spoken by Krishna himself. Now, this same thing happened in Benares. When Lord Chaitanya visited there were two devotees there. One of them begged the Lord to do something to change the opinion of all these exalted sannyasis that were there. They were all Mayavadis. Prakasananda Saraswati and his I think he had up to 1,000 other sannyasis that were following him. There's some large number of sannyasis that were following him, and they were criticizing Lord Chaitanya. So he came to Benares on his way to Vrindavan, and he came back again. So on his way back, that one devotee begged him, please do something, because they're saying very bad things about you. So Lord Chaitanya goes to meet Prakasananda Saraswati, and I guess they had a temple, and they were just amazed. They couldn't believe, how beautiful and brilliant Lord Chaitanya was. And when he came in, he sat down where everyone washes their hands and feet. So they rushed over and said, please don't sit here, please come over here, and you're so brilliant. You are like Narayana himself. So then, in the discussion with Prakasananda Saraswati, who criticized him and said, you're such a beautiful young man, but you've taken initiation in a lower caste or lower level sannyasi, and you're doing very sentimental and embarrassing things by chanting Hare Krishna in the streets. Why are you doing this? And Lord Chaitanya said, well, my Gurudev told me that I'm just a fool, and I should just chant Hare Krishna. That's why I'm doing this. But then he goes on to explain the special verse that was I'll think of the name in a second. And he gives an explanation that everyone was just flabbergasted by. They couldn't believe it. How does this person know so much? And then they realized that he has to be Narayana himself, and they surrendered to him. And it's an amazing story, because they were pejoratively representing him to the public. So he came and straightened out his image, who he actually is. And so it's very important that we identify ourselves for the public. We have to do certain things that connect to the public and gives a very positive image of who we are. And then, how is that happening? But when people see that we are genuinely givers and genuinely compassionate and genuinely empathetic, that we actually care about people, and we're actually doing things that are actually good for the community. So when you're identified like that, then people will ask you questions. They want to associate with you. They want to be with you, and they want to support you, and so many things, right? So we have to learn not to always be on our best behavior, always be kind and gentle, and very, very, let's say, giving. And that identifies who we are. Okay. So then it says, Because it says here, to the demons, such explanations by Krishna himself may appear to be strange because the demons always study Krishna from their own standpoint. But those who are devotees heartily welcome the statements of Krishna when they are spoken by Krishna himself. The devotees will always worship such authoritative statements of Krishna because they are always eager to know more and more about him. The atheists who consider Krishna an ordinary man may in this way come to know that Krishna is superhuman, that he is Satchitananda Vigraha, the eternal form of bliss and knowledge, that he is transcendental, and that he is above the domination of the modes of material nature and above the influence of time and space. A devotee of Krishna like Arjuna is undoubtedly above any misunderstanding of the transcendental position of Krishna. Arjuna's putting this question before the Lord is simply an attempt by the devotee to defy the atheistic attitude of persons who consider Krishna to be an ordinary human being subject to the modes of material nature. What a wonderful purport by Prabhupada. And if he didn't write that purport, we would not understand this about Arjuna. See? That's why you have to read the purports. There are people, they read the whole Bhagavad Gita, but just the verses, and not the purports, and people listen to it, right? And the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, just the verses and not the purports. So that is a mistake, a big mistake. So then the next verse is what Prabhupada was alluding to, where it says, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Bahuni me vititani janmani tavacharjuna. Tanyaham Veda Sarvani Natvam Veda Parantapa. The personality of God had said, many, many births, both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. So there's a long purport here. Why? To explain this verse. And it's very important that we hear it. And it says, Prabhupada says, in the Brahma Samhita 533, we have information of many, many incarnations of the Lord. It is stated there, Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadim, Anantarupam, and so forth. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is the original person, absolute, infallible, without beginning. Although expanded into unlimited forms, he is still the same original, the oldest, and the person appearing as a fresh youth. Such eternal, blissful, all-knowing forms of the Lord are usually understood by the best Vedic scholars, but they are always manifest to pure, unalloyed devotees. Manifest, that means the devotees are seeing it. It is also stated in Brahma Samhita 539, Ramadi Murti Sukala Nimena Tistan. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, Krishna, who is always situated in various incarnations as Rama, Nrsimha, and many sub-incarnations as well, but who is the original personality of Godhead known as Krishna, and who incarnates personally also. In the Vedas also it is said that the Lord, although one without a second, manifests himself in innumerable forms. He is like the Vaidurya stone, which changes color yet still remains one. So that's an amazing stone. We should get one of those. All those multiforms are understood by the pure, unalloyed devotees, but not by a simple study of the Vedas. Notice that it says, not by a simple study of the Vedas. Vedesa durlabam adurlabam atma bhakto. So that's also from Brahma Samhita. That means that one cannot understand the Vedas. Basically, it's saying one cannot understand the Vedas simply by reading, but one must hear it spoken by a devotee, or one can only understand it through a devotee. Right? Okay. Devotees like Arjuna are constant companions of the Lord, and whenever the Lord incarnates, the associate devotees also incarnate in order to serve him. So that verse, is the seventh, it's Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Cha Vedesa Durlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. So it says, devotees like Arjuna are constant companions of the Lord, and whenever the Lord incarnates, the associate devotees also incarnate in order to serve the Lord in different capacities. Arjuna is one of these devotees, and in this verse it is understood that some millions of years ago, when Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god Vivaswan, Arjuna in a different capacity was also present. But the difference between the Lord and Arjuna is that the Lord remembered the incident, whereas Arjuna could not remember. Why is that? Because when a jiva appears in the material world, he has a certain body. That body is not eternal. But Krishna's body is eternal. So he never forgets, whereas we forget. So we see the difference here, that Arjuna is not the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But whenever one appears in the material world, a jiva appears in the material world, they have a material body. Right? That body can be spiritualized by using it all the time in Krishna consciousness. But here we're seeing the difference between God, who's independent and full of knowledge. He has full knowledge, and he is independent, Swaraj. So therefore, Arjuna is not on the level of Krishna, right? So therefore, he has forgotten that when Krishna spoke to the sun god. But the difference between the Lord and Arjuna is that the Lord remembered the incident, whereas Arjuna could not remember. That is the difference between the part and parcel living entity and the Supreme Lord. Although Arjuna is addressed here as the mighty hero who could subdue the enemies, he is unable to recall what had happened in his various past births. Therefore, a living entity, however great he may be in the material estimation, can never equal the Supreme Lord. Anyone who is a constant companion of the Lord is certainly a liberated person, but he cannot be equal to the Lord. The Lord is described in the Brahma Samhita as infallible, achyuta, which means that he never forgets himself, even though he is in material contact. Therefore, the Lord and the living entity can never be equal in all respects, even if the living entity is as liberated as Arjuna. Although Arjuna is a devotee of the Lord, he sometimes forgets the nature of the Lord, but by the divine grace, a devotee can at once understand the infallible condition of the Lord, whereas a non-devotee or a demon cannot understand this transcendental nature. Consequently, these descriptions in the Gita cannot be understood by demoniac brains. Now that's very significant, because how do you get a demoniac brain? Let's ask that question. Instead of a devotee brain, you get a demoniac brain. Well, it's very simple. You just associate with demons all the time. You'll get a demoniac brain also. Just like the story of Madhavachandra Prabhu, when he was first introduced to Krishna consciousness, he had a demoniac brain. We all did. I did also, right? And the one thing he was most proud of at that time was his wine cellar in his home, right? and that's the thing, like, let's say in a devotee's house, they're most proud about their altar, and well, he was not a devotee at that time, right? So he was most proud about his wine cellar. And he would take people down, they'd come to his house and say, well, let me show you my wine cellar. He'd go down and show all the expensive wines that he had, right? So that's a demoniac brain. Now, how do you get a demoniac brain? By associating with demons. And there's plenty of demons in India, plenty of them. Almost as many, probably more, because there's a bigger population there, more than in the United States. And by associating with them, you get a demoniac brain. And even here, if we're always associating with demons, we'll get a demoniac brain. Right? What is a demoniac brain? Always don't take Krishna consciousness seriously. Don't actually believe things about Krishna. Just like when we hear about the spiritual world, do we actually believe it? Most people don't believe it. It sounds too good to believe, right? So by associating with demons, we get a demoniac brain. So then it says, the Lord is described in Brahma Samhita as infallible, achyuta, which means that he never forgets himself, even though he is in material contact. Therefore, the Lord and the living entity can never be equal in all respects, even if the living entity is as liberated as Arjuna. Although Arjuna is a devotee of the Lord, he sometimes forgets the nature of the Lord, but by the divine grace, a devotee can at once understand the infallible condition of the Lord, whereas a non-devotee or a demon cannot understand this transcendental nature. Consequently, these descriptions in the Gita cannot be understood by demoniac brains. Krishna remembered acts which were performed by him millions of years before, but Arjuna could not, despite the fact that both Krishna and Arjuna are eternal in nature. We may also note herein that a living entity forgets everything due to his change of body, but the Lord remembers because he does not change his Satchitananda body. He is Advaita, which means there is no distinction between his body and himself. Everything in relation to him is spirit, whereas the conditioned soul is different from his material body. Now, the Mayavadis use the word Advaita also, but they use it in a different sense, meaning that at one point the jiva becomes Paramatma. They call that Advaita. But real Advaita is that Krishna and his transcendental body are one. They're not two. Whereas we have a body that's different than our soul. So we have this duality. But Krishna doesn't have that duality. Therefore, he never forgets. Whereas all we do is forget all the time. Not only one lifetime to the next, but even in this lifetime. Right? So, and because the Lord's body and self are identical, his position is always different from that of the ordinary living entity. Even when he descends to the material platform, the demons cannot adjust themselves to this transcendental nature of the Lord, which the Lord himself explains in the following verse. Well, you see, this fourth chapter is full of amazing realizations about Krishna. Right? Okay, so then in the purport, I don't think I finished it, did I? No. So in the purport it says, and it's a very profound point. He's talking about, therefore the natural question arises concerning who made them interdependent. Just like for us to see, there has to be the sun. And it has to be Vivaswan that controls the sun, or he's the sun god, right? But without eyes, we can't see, so we would not be able to appreciate the sun. But without the sun, we would not be able to see if we had eyes. So there's an interdependence between the sun, or Vivaswan, and us, right? And in everything in the material world, there's this interdependence for things to happen and work. But Krishna himself is totally independent. He's not interdependent with anything or anyone. He's totally independent. So therefore, as Garbhodaksha Vishnu, he can create Brahma without a wife. Doesn't need a wife. Because he's independent. He's not interdependent. But if you want to have a child, you have to depend on a wife to have a child. So and the wife has to depend on the husband. So everything is interdependent in the material world. Now, the question, as Prabhupada says, he says, therefore the natural question arises concerning who made them interdependent. The one who has made such a relationship of interdependence must be ultimately completely independent. See, now this is spiritual deduction. This is the way devotees think. They don't think based on guessing and hunches. They begin from self-evident Vedic statements, and then they use spiritual deductive reasoning. So here Prabhupada says, look, everything is interdependent in the material world. Now, who made this interdependence? Who made such a relationship of interdependence? Whoever did that must ultimately be completely independent. Otherwise, how could he do it without anybody else, right? If like, I can't create a child without a wife, right? So if you ask me to create a child on my own, I can't do it. So I'm interdependent. And the wife is also interdependent, right? But Krishna can do these things independently. This ultimate source of all interdependence is the supreme truth, or Paramatma, the Supersoul, who is not dependent on anything else. He is swasraya srayaha. He is only dependent on his self, and thus he is the supreme shelter of everything. Although Paramatma and Brahman are subordinate to Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is Purushottama, or the super person, he is the source of the super soul also. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:18, Lord Krishna says that he is the Purushottama and the source of everything. And thus it is concluded that Sri Krishna is the ultimate source and shelter of all entities, including the super soul and supreme Brahman, even accepting that there is no difference between the super soul and the individual soul. The individual soul is dependent on the super soul for being liberated from the illusion of material energy. So remember yesterday we also said we can't really exist without the super soul. Although, so therefore we depend on the super soul. We're dependent. Super soul, of course, can live without us. Okay, go tell them again to please keep quiet. They just cannot yakety yak. It's like a a karmi woman that never stops talking nonsense. The individual is under the clutches of illusory energy, and therefore, although qualitatively one with the supersoul, he is under the illusion of identifying himself with matter. And to get out of this illusory conception of factual life, the individual soul has to depend on the supersoul to be recognized as one with him. In that sense, also, the supersoul is the supreme shelter, and there is no doubt about it. The individual living entity, the jiva, is always dependent on the supersoul, Paramatma, because the individual soul forgets his spiritual identity, whereas the supersoul, Paramatma, does not forget his transcendental position. In the Bhagavad Gita, these separate positions of the Jivatma and the Paramatma are specifically mentioned. In the 4th chapter, Arjuna, this jiva soul, is represented as forgetful of his many, many previous births. But the Lord, the Supersoul, is not forgetful. The Lord even remembers when he taught the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god some billions of years before. The Lord can remember such millions and billions of years as stated in Bhagavad Gita 7:26. The Lord, in his eternal blissful body of knowledge, is fully aware of all that happened in the past. Okay, so this is scientific knowledge of Krishna. And if we understand this, then we become devotees. If we don't understand it, we remain with a demoniac mind. Right? So I wanted to cover another point in the message of God. What time is it now?
7:15.
Okay, I'll be real quick. here it says, if out of ignorance of the subtle laws of nature, we were to try to justify all our mundane deeds by saying that they are being done by the will of the personality of Godhead, then we would be bringing partiality, inebriety, and gracelessness into the acts of the all-good personality of Godhead. It should never be imagined that the various mundane discrepancies arise by the will of the personality of Godhead, that some are happy by his will while others are unhappy by his will. Such differences in the material world are due to the proper or improper use of free will by the individual living entities. So this is very prevalent in India. People always say, it's all his doing. Right? So all the nonsense that they're doing, it's all his doing. He is doing it. Right? You see, the whole, almost every Indian I've met, right, at one point, or especially those from Punjab, at one point or other will say something like that, right? Just like a friend of mine who's not Punjabi, but he, one day we were talking, and he said, I told him, I said, look, Prabhu, you're talking nonsense. He said, what do you mean I'm talking nonsense? I said, you're talking nonsense. Everything you're saying is nonsense. He said, no. Whatever I'm saying, it's his. He is saying it. Whatever I'm thinking, he is thinking it. I said, are you crazy or what? He said, no. I have shastric evidence. I said, what's your shastric evidence? He says, Indriyanam manas chasmi. He said, 10th chapter, 22nd verse, 3rd line. Indriyanam manas chasmi. Krishna says, and I am the mind. So whatever I'm thinking in my mind, it's him that's thinking. I said, Prabhu, this is a gross nonsense interpretation. That's not what that means. So, see, he has shastric evidence by misinterpreting Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so what does it mean? Indriyanam manas chasmi. Well, literally, it means I am the mind. He says, of the senses, I am the mind. And the living beings, I am the living force or consciousness. So that means that Krishna has created these things. So he's non-different than them. But he's also given partial independence to the living entity to have limited free will. So therefore, there's a correct way of using that limited free will and an incorrect way. Because of that, it says, if out of ignorance the subtle laws of nature, if out of ignorance of the subtle laws of nature, we were to try to justify all our mundane deeds by saying that they are being done by the will of the personality of Godhead, then we would be bringing partiality, inebriety, and gracelessness into the acts of the all-good personality of Godhead. So the key to understanding this is in the first couple of words of this phrase, of this sentence. It says, if out of ignorance of the subtle laws of nature. Well, what are the laws of nature? Birth, death, old age, and disease. And the laws of nature are very eloquently explained in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where it says, 5th chapter, 22nd verse, in many verses, different laws of material nature, subtle laws are explained. But in the 5th chapter, 22nd verse, it says, therefore, those who are true yogis or learned transcendentalists are not attracted by sense pleasures, which are the causes of continuous material existence. The more one is addicted to material pleasures, the more he is entrapped by material miseries. This is the law of material nature. It's a subtle law of material nature. So, therefore, he says, if out of ignorance of the subtle laws of nature, we were to try to justify all our mundane deeds by saying that they are being done by the will of the personality of Godhead. That's what they're doing. In many people in India, they say, well, he is doing. He has said this. If it's in my mind, it's because Krishna has put it there. You know? And this one man told me, it's not my fault at all that I'm always thinking of sense gratification. It's his fault. He said, it's his fault. He made women to be so beautiful. It's his fault. You see, so this is an important point for us to meditate upon. Hare Krishna.
I remember that the story you had shared earlier about the Cheta Guru, the driver.
Yes.
I always remember that it's very interesting story. Whenever someone says my mind says, I immediately recall that story.
That's a true story.
Yeah.
You see how crazy people are? These are crazy, crazy, crazy people. And there are millions of them. So no wonder there's so much trouble in the world. You know. Okay, you want to chant?
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhagati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Bandhamohi Savadhana Mate
Bando Mui Sabadana Mate
Jahara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatoriya Jai
Janara Prasade He Bhavatoriya Jai
Krishna Prapti Ho Jaha Hoite
Krishna Prapti Hoya Oite
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Aikya
Guru Mukha Padma Vaikya Chitete Koriya
Arna Kori Ho Mane Asha Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utama Gati
Jai Prasad Pure Sarva Asha
Ye Prasade Pure Sarva
चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिला जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
दिव्य ज्ञान दे प्रकाशितो
प्रेमा भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जायते
प्रेम भक्ति जा होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
वेदे गाय जहाँ रचरितो
वेद गाय जनर चरितो
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आधम जनारा बंधु
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अदान जनारा बंधु
लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना
लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना
हा हा प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पद छाया
आ प्रभु कोरा दया दया मोरे पद छाया
एबे जास गुशक त्रिभुवाना
एबे अस्कुशक्ति भुवाना
प्रभु पाद पतित पवाना
प्रभु पद पतित पवाना
जयो प्रभु पदा जयो प्रभु पदा जयो प्रभु पदा जयो प्रभु पदा
Bada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
नमा नमा ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने नमः
Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namane
नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाशदादिशदारिणे
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskadyadisatarine
जयो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda
जयो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita
Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare
Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Nityai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nityai Gaura Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol.
Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Sarvajivachara Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anantakoti Vaishnavindi ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Shikoho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapura Dham ki jai. Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Tulasi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Ganga Maya ki jai. Jamuna Maya ki jai. Samveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanand. All glories to the Assembled Lords. All glories to the Assembled. All glories to the Assembled Lords. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavana ki jai. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Chari Nivesesa Srinivadi Paskatya Desatani. The lotus feet of our spiritual master is the only way by which we can attain the pure devotions. I bow down to the lotus feet.
Suffering and obtain the mercy. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified. That meant the lotus be in the perfect fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates. By him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Spiritual master, the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master. Oh, look, be merciful. Give me the shade of your lotus.